Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for our webinar, Before the Ball Drops, Your Year-End Financial Guide. My name is Kelly Blount, and I will be today's moderator. We have an exciting agenda planned for you today as we discuss ways you can prioritize your end-of-year finances. With that, let's go ahead and get started. I'd like to turn things over to Todd Moore, Director of Education with Trinity Debt Management, to introduce himself and take us through today's presentation.
Well, thank you so much, Kelly, and thank you to everyone joining us this afternoon. It's always great to be with you and appreciate your time. Here we are coming into the end of the year. It's kind of hard to believe that we are now heading into the holidays and already making plans for 2026. I have to take that in myself. So this is a perfect time to start thinking about our year-end financial checklist. When we think about our personal finances as we come to the year end, there's a lot for us to plan. And really what we're doing is planning ahead for the following year, 2026, and trying to make some wise choices about how we prioritize our funds, organize our budget, set new goals, and even plan for our tax refund. I mean, that's interesting to think about that here in November with the holidays coming. But these are the things that we have to do to get prepared for 2026 and make sure that we have a successful year. So let's just go ahead and jump in. One of the first things that we always want to do when we're thinking about trying to make our checklist, really everything is going to come back in some way to our budget. Many of the folks that are on the call, we've done so much work over the last couple of years just thinking about budgeting. You really can never do enough thinking about budgeting. There's always these unexpected risks and unexpected expenses that seem to come our way. So it's very important to evaluate, assess where you're at now as we make other decisions in the coming year. And we're going to be covering a lot of ground today, lay out, I think, a broad financial plan for us, kind of set ourselves in motion. So first things first, when we're thinking about our overall budget, income and expenses, where are we currently? So every dollar that is currently associated with debt in some form, for 2026, what we're trying to do is minimize as much debt as we can. As I've said, we always have risk. There's always this inherent risk just in our personal finances, something with the home, something, with our car, our jobs. It could be any number of things, but there's always a cost associated. So what we're trying to do is always kind of stay a step or two, hopefully ahead, and be prepared. If you are not currently budgeting, or if you think that you've got, a budget in your head, but it's not really something that you are using to set priorities, align your finances, lay out financial goals, these are all things that we want to do for this year-end financial checklist. These are things that we must put into practice in 2026. So when we're thinking about budgets, and I get asked this question all the time, hey, where should I start? What's a good budget for me to put together? Talked a lot about this particular approach. These percentages that are laid out here, 50, 30, 20, these are guidelines for us to kind of structure our funds. So when we start to think about just establishing some form of budget, what we're hoping to do is take our total and start to kind of parse this out into some percentages that make sense for us. So here, first thing is always prioritizing our required expenses. So, ideally what we're saying of our total, about half of that is going to go to these required expenses, groceries, insurance, outstanding debts, things like that. Then it also prioritizes a savings goal. So here we were looking at, 20%. You can't get to 20%. Some of these percentages are slightly off. At least you're moving in the direction of saying, I have a structured plan, and that's going to be very important. So 20% of your income, we start to figure out how we do this to create some savings. We have to have that savings. Cash in hand is the ability to meet our risks without having to finance in some other form. We have some cash to, supplement if we have to borrow, but cash on hand is always important. So we want to build that savings goal in the coming year. This budget also allows for some discretionary spending. In fact, 30% under this particular plan allows you to have some freedom here to spend how you want. It's a pretty big number, so you can spend this number how you want. The most important thing is that you look at this as a way to structure your spending. So 50-30-20 this is really a way to get you started for folks who want a savings goal. And we'll talk a lot more in the coming slides about what exactly we mean by savings. There's ways to do this through our retirement savings, if that is your goal. If it's just having emergency fund, we want to kind of be specific about what we mean by savings as we work our way through the budgeting process. And that's one of the challenges that I would ask you starting in 2026 in this year-end plan. What is your highest priority in terms of savings? Is this just creating emergency savings? Is it emergency savings and something else? You need to be clear on that, because that allows us to structure and create our priorities moving forward. So the second budget here, if that one you're saying, well, I've been doing this for a while. I need something else, something that I can put move me in a different direction. Ready to challenge myself in a different way. I really like this approach with money flow. What it does require you to do, this is for folks that are going to be using budgets that are, your pay is consistent. We don't have seasonal employment. Things are pretty consistent through time. Okay, so we know roughly where we're going. What we want to do is kind of automate maybe some of those other goals. So we want to set it and forget it. So the credit union also uses the money management desktop tool, which I'm always trying to plug that. And, I think it's a great tool to use to kind of set this budget into practice. If you're interested in setting that up, you just want to talk with the folks at the credit union and they will give you some guidance on how to do that. But it is a great tool to practice this particular approach. Now, automated, the way it works is you're going to set dates and timelines. All that structure has to be in place. And then what you're doing is aligning the amounts to those due dates. So if you're interested, if you're someone who, occasionally lapses on your credit cards and you're just starting to make some mistakes, or some of your loan payments, or you want to use this budget to incrementally create a savings goal. There's a lot of creativity that can be put into this. You can say, okay, of my savings, I automatically on the 20th want X amount of dollars to go into a separate savings. So now we're automating the process to build an emergency savings fund. We could also say we want some additional funds to go towards the principal payment on a car loan, something like that. So part of our financial goal, our checklist, we want to pay off our car in 2026 because we're going to need a new one soon. So we want to automate this process, pay this down, accelerate the loan repayment in some form here, use this budget approach to do that as well. So there's a lot of ways to get creative in doing it, and that's what I like about it. If you're consistent on your income, you need a little more structure, but you want to automate the process and tie it to a financial goal, the money flow budget can help you do that. And then if you're looking at establishing things for your recurring expenses, again, great way to do this. The money's in the account, you have it on auto pay, and it's done. What that requires you to do, however, is to make certain that, again, you're monitoring and tracking so that you're not getting too close to overdrafting your account, because money flow will require you to have set amounts. They will be taken out. So you really need to be very careful about your income and expenses and aligning those due dates. But the great benefit of doing it this way, if you're in that situation where you're ready to do this now, particularly for accelerating your debt repayment, this budget is a great tool to do that. Or if you're looking to create, again, an additional savings goal, the money flow budget has great efficiency in helping you do that. So I'll encourage you this year to kind of think about how you're budgeting. What is your current method? Can it be improved? And then what are you doing to align these types of budgets to a broader financial goal? That's going to be key. Just move beyond, I'm just trying to balance my overall budget at this point. If you're in that situation, that's fantastic. That's great. But we want to encourage you to take it a step further in 2026. We're actually looking at prioritizing certain financial goals and accelerating debt repayment, other things like that, get us ahead in 2026. So we often, when we think about, going down this checklist of items, we know now the structure and where that's at in terms of budgeting. Again, one part of our savings goal, both of those budgets build in a savings priority. Emergency savings fund, again, is, it's really crucial to start to build that now. And, folks will ask me all the time, well, how much should I have in the emergency savings fund? As much as you can contribute to it. I mean, ideally, we read this in popular literature all the time, hey, 3 to 6 months of savings, things like that. We have to be practical. I mean, not everyone has that ability to do that. So, just in simplifying this concept, what I would say is we're going to start somewhere and we're going to get as far as we can possibly go with this concept, okay? Because all things are trade-offs. Let's be specific about what we mean by savings. If we're talking about, okay, a simple savings, emergency savings, we put that away. Well, if I've got X number of dollars and I want to increase on my 401k and you're under investing at this point, part of that savings goal is we're going to increase our 401k or 403b, our retirement fund employee benefit. We're going to do that, okay? And we're going to think about this emergency savings fund as well. But how much can you go? So that you start to answer that question once you start to get specific, through this process. You got to align some funds to those concepts. How much is it going to cost? So keeping it, just in line with the theme here with emergency savings. Again, having cash on hand, it's just an incredible benefit. Keeps us out of debt, allows us to meet our emergencies, in full or at least a part of that total cost. So I really want you to get excited about this idea and start working towards emergency savings fund. Think about what that dollar amount will be. The first budget, 20% of savings. I'm going to encourage you just to maybe think about it like this. Take your income and expenses. Let's prioritize. In 2026, what we're trying to do again is to align our finances to our highest priorities. So I am going to encourage you, as you build your fund, to figure out exactly what that amount can be. What, we've often talked about how much should go into the fund itself, and whether 3 to 6 months is doable. And in some cases, it may not be, available to us financially to have 3 months emergency savings set aside. So what we're trying to do is get as close to those numbers as we can. What that requires us to do is finding ways to cut expenses. Very difficult as we as we move into the holiday season, but necessary. As we're thinking about one of the things I was thinking about in preparation for today is, again, going back and looking at our prior webinar when we think about how to structure some type of budget just for our overall holiday expenses. That's going to be very important in itself, just to keep us from maybe overspending so that we don't have a lot of credit card debt and other buy now, pay later and other expenses. If we're thinking about how to cut expenses, we really want to be savvy about how we budget through the holidays, because as we move into the current year, 2026, this is a great time to really think about our financial checklist in terms of eliminating outstanding debts. Every dollar that's aligned towards debt is a dollar that we don't have to meet our emergency savings fund or some other financial priority. So that's going to be, I know even for me, I've had some unexpected expenses and things like that. That's the inherent risk that we talk about. I'm sure you've had some expenses as well. So cutting expenses this current year, that's a really it's a high priority in this coming year. Automate the process. If we can use the automated process, this is a fantastic way to set this plan in motion. I'm a big fan of this. You can transfer funds when you get paid. You transfer it over into a separate savings account, start to build that fund. You take 3 months of savings, maybe pay off some outstanding debt. Perfect way to do that. But if we want to get started on this goal, set it up so that it pools on a certain date. Let's say the 20th of every month, we're going to pool. We set up a separate savings account. We build that fund. And now we're on our way to rebuilding our emergency savings. So if you have any questions about that, please reach out to the credit union. It's very easy to automate the process and to set this up. Also, it can even be done through payroll deduction. You can go a couple different routes to make this happen. The most important thing is that you set it as a priority for yourself in the coming year. And also, if you need any help, with the two budgets that we presented today, whether it's just a basic budget to get you started, or you're looking to kind of get a little more savvy and how to set some things up to align it to financial goals, give me a call. I'd be glad to help you and work directly with the credit union to make certain that you're successful. So earlier we talked about this concept of savings, and I've got a whole list of things here that we've listed. 401k, which again, I'll talk about that towards the end today. If it's an employee-based program, 401k, 403b, the idea is that in my experience working with so many different organizations and businesses, individuals, retirement funding just is really, there's a lot of underinvestment that I've seen. So you're not getting, if you can't take the full match, you've only got so much money to go around. And sometimes it's just not, again, it's not reasonable or it's not practical sometimes to do it. Certainly is reasonable, but get as close to that as you can. Like this year, make it a priority to try to eliminate some of your outstanding debts. And then we're going up by 1%. Let's just try. What I'm trying to encourage you to do is move forward in the coming year. Challenge yourself to move forward. I certainly want to do the same. So what we want to do, if you're at 2%, let's try 3. If you're at 3, we want to go to 4. Let's just keep pushing ourselves forward. Eliminate your outstanding debts, and let's figure out a way to, move those debts aside so that we have more towards getting into the, the retirement investment kind of phase of our planning process. That's an important part of our checklist. So the way we get there, again, is to treat it as a predictable monthly expense, just like we would have from every other kind of financial priority or utility or anything else that we have to pay. This savings goal, bam, right there it is. We're doing it every month. We know what we're aiming at. We have a goal in mind, and the dollar amount is predictable every single month. And again, I'll just encourage you to automate that process. It is a surefire way to kind of get there. You set it in motion and you continue to move forward, and things will move quickly. So that is our goal in the coming year. Now, tracking expenses. I put this on our list as well. We think about our financial checklist for the coming year. Oftentimes folks will start budgeting and then they fall short on the tracking part of the plan. So we get a budget set, we got income and expenses, we categorize everything, we start thinking up our financial plan, and then we just forget to track our expenses. This priority, I think, has a lot to do with kind of cash expenses. And the way I like to think about tracking expenses is I like to think about what can I do to shift my own financial behavior. What can I do to make a couple changes in myself, how I prioritize things, so that I just have some extra cash. So let's say, for instance, that you want to find $100 that will help you get a new car this year. You need $100 to help you make that car payment for this new car that you need to buy, okay, or pay for the insurance or something like that. And you're kind of tight and you're figuring out, here's what I'm supposed to do. Well, you're going to need to track your expenses. There's probably $100 in there easily just in, random expenses throughout the month. So I'm going to encourage you again to use the money management tool. That's a great way to do it. In prior years, I've talked about Toshel, which is kind of an app you use on your phone. It requires you to plug in some expenses, but you already have the money management tool. It's right there. It's provided to you through your credit union. You also have all the information in your bank account to start tracking. And that allows you to go and look at your transaction history. And I'm going to encourage you to do that, because you go in, you start looking for patterns within your spending. Are you someone who spends money on X? What is it? I can tell you, I fall into probably the coffee habit. That's probably my big guilty pleasure. Starbucks and caffeine. I'm cranking myself up out here doing presentations and just working with folks, but it adds up. It certainly adds up, and it's almost embarrassing how much it adds up. So I try to make those adjustments myself. We all have something where that number can add up. So I'm just going to encourage you to think about how you track your spending, because $100 can make a big difference in your emergency savings fund. It's again, it's money that you can put towards some other priority. What do you give up to gain something else? Take time to go in and track your expenses, learn a few things about your spending behavior, and make better choices. Next on our list is our credit capacity. For many of us, this is key. When we think about a checklist, this has to become a priority. If we're thinking about first-time home buyers or a new car or a renovation to our home, whatever that idea is that you have in mind right now, for most of us, we are looking at our credit capacity. Do we have the score needed to get a loan to take care of all these other things? Okay. And even if we've got a little savings and we're not quite there, we have to have credit to make certain that we can borrow from the credit union, finance that remaining balance to take it all the way home. So it's a very, very important part of our checklist for 2026 is having a strong score. So we've talked a lot about scoring, and I'll encourage you to go back and look at some of the presentations that go into great detail about each of the factors. I'm not going to do that here today, but I do want you to become very familiar with this model and understand how it functions. So I will, excuse me, I will encourage you to go back and to look at that. The main thing that we're looking at here is keeping those payments consistent and evaluating our outstanding debts. And this again ties all back to our budget and allows us to really raise our score through time. Those two factors we definitely want to focus on in the coming year. So I always like to say this: what is our credit goal? What is it that we need? Personal loan, car loans, there's any number of different financial goals that we have. But in our case, what we want to do is we want to start with a credit report and figure out where are we at now. What's our baseline? Where are we at to establish our goals? And then figure out how are we going to get there. So certainly use me as a resource. That's why we're here. Trinity Debt Management will certainly help you with that. I can pull a report and identify any kind of weaknesses in your overall credit score. Here are some things that we can do to establish a better score. We'll set a timeline. We'll figure out how to get you there. So please give me a call. There'll be contact information towards the end that will provide you all that information. But we need products and services to help us attain our goals. So please let me know if I can help you. So first thing we want to do is think about this outstanding goal with loan acceleration. I want to start here for just a moment. When we think about outstanding debts, okay, if you look back here in the previous slide, 30% of our score comes from, it's calculated by 30%. Our score either goes up or down depending on how much we carry or how much, are we just overextended? Are we reducing our debts? 30% of our score is going to come from outstanding debts, good or bad. So what we want to do, if you're thinking about, a major purchase in the coming year, we might want to go to thinking about loan acceleration. So part of our checklist is trying to look at our overall budget and figure out, within our total amount, if I take my current loan and I accelerate it by, $100 a month, $150 a month, where does that get me at the end of 2026? And I've talked about this before. I want to share it for folks who may be on the call. So if you go to calculator.net, there are various types of financial calculators listed there. There's probably also financial calculators that are listed on the credit union's website. But what I want you to do is you start to plug in some numbers so that you can actually quantify what it is that you're trying to do, okay? let's simplify that. So you want to plug in your current, loan. You got an interest rate, what you're currently making on that, the payment amount, those sorts of things. Adding a $50 to $100 extra, where does that get me? How do I accelerate this loan so that I pay it off and get me ready for my next larger purchase? That's really what we're trying to do. So as you make your if you make your financial plan and your checklist this year, eliminating outstanding debts, I'm going to encourage you to have that as one of your highest goals. As we pay down, whether it's credit card debts or you're paying off, maybe a car loan, you're getting close into that term, the car is starting to have some issues. I know I'm certainly, thinking about this myself. You have some issues, you want to pay off a car loan, get things done before something worse happens to the car. There's a lot of things happening in this coming year for, being able to access loans for homes with the interest rates are starting to shift. Now's the time to start reducing debts. And then also with your credit cards, reducing those credit card balances down. It's very important because the less that we're carrying, the higher your score is going to be. If you're carrying beyond 30%, how close can you get to 30% and downwards to really raise that score? So if you're maxed out on several credit cards, let's work through your budget. Let's figure out what we can do to kind of bring our account balances down, raise our score. Again, that gets us back to a manageable debt level and allows us to free up opportunities for credit. If you have any questions about that, I'd be more than happy to help you through that process. So this is just a kind of summary of some of those key items that we were talking about, for folks that are on the call that may have had a couple bad debts, and you're thinking, I'm really trying to raise my score. I've got some issues. I see this all the time where, folks will get focused entirely on the debt side and they forego all the other things they can do to actually raise their score through positive payment history. So statute of limitations on debt collection, 7 years. I'm not saying don't pay your debts. This gets kind of detailed. I won't go into it. But the idea is we have to look at debts. And we also have to look at the positive side for credit building. So one part of that is just reducing those balances. And then the other part is if we do have some outstanding debts that we need to take care of, there's a whole series of options that we can look at to reduce those debts. For active open accounts, we've got these 3 methods, utilization, interest rate, and rollover. I won't go into great detail on these, but these are methods that you can apply now to align to your strategy. So the utilization is basically where we're changing the credit debt ratio. So that's that idea that we want to reduce all of our debts down to somewhere around 30% and to zero. What we will do is, if we have several cards, we're kind of shaving off the balances. So we're never paying that particular card off under this method. What we're trying to do is take our total. So if our utilization or how much we've used on a card is 100%, we're maxed out. We want to pay enough to kind of get things down to 70, 40, 30. We're shaving those balances down so that our total utilization across all cards is now, somewhere around 30%. Again, to quantify that, I've talked about this before, calculator.net. You can put in multiple credit cards with multiple interest rates and start to take $50 to $100. That's that tracking goal that we talked about through our checklist. If you do that, what you'll start to see is you can accelerate the debt repayment and really meet this goal. You may not get to zero, but you can probably get to 50%, 30% if you're carrying significant debt this year. Any questions on that, please let me know. I'll walk you through that process at Trinity. Utilization here, just a quick visual for you. Again, this is the credit debt ratio in practice. You start off, you start using the credit card through time. You go beyond that 30%, which is listed at the bottom of the slide. The further you go out, now you're maxed out, close to it, 70%, score starts to drop. So in the coming year, what we want to do is make that slope the other way. We're going to start paying down that outstanding debt, raise that score, and be able to strengthen our capacity, get the loans that we need. The next 2 slides here really is, again, part of that theme about just reducing. Some folks want to look at interest rates. rank order interest rates from highest to lowest. Again, credit card debt .net is a great resource for this. Rank order, prioritize by highest interest rate. And then we want to use that calculator to kind of figure out how long will it take me to pay this down through time. You know, it's a different way to do it. I think it's a slower way to do it in terms of overall credit scoring, but you can't argue with the math. But it is a different approach to just raising your score. But prioritizing by interest rate, highest to lowest, is one method to do this. And if you have the cash to align to this, then you can certainly save yourself money. And then lastly, the rollover method itself, another rank order approach. But what we're trying to do is, in this case, we focus, really our priority is our lowest dollar card. We pay it completely off, take that next, we challenge ourselves with that next card in addition to the monthly minimum. Now we've got this larger amount that we move forward. So it's a method of accelerating the loan repayment. All three of these really they're all great methods. It just depends on the amount of money that we have, your time, and your strategy. So those are the types of details that we look at when we do a credit report review and work with the credit union to kind of figure out what's our most efficient way to get you into the product that you need. So let's shift gears now. We've kind of covered quite a lot of ground to setting ourselves up, our checklist of items now. If you haven't already gotten an email or something from your employer, we know that these flexible spending account amounts, it's open enrollment season. As we work our way through the checklist, this also becomes a part of our budget and our total expenses, paying into our healthcare and our flexible spending accounts, certainly part of our overall income. Couple things here. As the enrollment period it's currently open for many of us. I know we're doing it here at work, and those are either closing soon or hopefully they haven't closed on your end yet. But I know the benefit period it's upon us. If you're doing a health savings account, try to figure out what that number is. Most of us are pretty aware of the flexible spending account and how that works. The new rollover provision this year is $660. So I listed here for us, part of what I'm trying to do here is just to have you focus. You don't want to underinvest in your flexible spending account, your healthcare needs. And then you also don't want to lose money in the coming year. I've been on both sides of that equation at times, but as we work through our checklist, this is a very important part of thinking about our healthcare needs in 2026. So, right now, if you are in that process, try to figure out, looking back a couple years, maybe average out what your flexible spending account balances should look like. How much do you actually need? Have you lost money in prior years? Where do you want to go? If you have kids in the family and you have some planning that you need to do for surgeries or anything else that tonsils, who knows, all those things can happen. It really runs a whole wide range of things. Try to be reasonable about these amounts. You don't want to underinvest in them because that's more cash out of your own pocket you have to come up with. But I always encourage folks to really be careful to have, make sure you have adequate coverage through your healthcare accounts. If you're the type of person who just puts this off, or you need some additional help, I just encourage you to reach out to folks and talk with your plan provider if you haven't done that. But just be savvy as you work through, because this is an important part of your plan. Make certain that you use it or you lose it when it comes to your flexible spending account balances. Although 660 does roll over into 2026. So an important part of our plan. A couple things on the tax side. Someone asked me about this. I included it in our slides. This would be quite nice if any of us have a family member who is able to provide some type of annual gift. There are cases where you have grandparents, or someone passes away in the family. They want to, what is it in terms of a gift, even for a down payment for a home? What does that look like? So $19,000 per person on the federal gift side. So an annual gift without having some type of tax on a gift. This can be a way, so, a family member can gift towards a down payment on a home or a car, any number of different things. If you're fortunate enough to have that, it's a true blessing. And if, this is a great way to kind of make those types of plans as well. And then also, part of, I think, is something that you might want to consider for any kind of future college planning. If we have anyone on the call with us today who's thinking about 529 or interested in 529 education plans, tax deferred and tax-free withdrawal. Think about that: tax deferred and tax-free withdrawal for qualified expenses. So there's been a lot of changes in the federal student loan program, and the plans are not only confusing, but just trying to look out and what the future of student loans will look like. I don't exactly know myself. I do try to follow these plans and try to make the best sense of them as I can. We have done some student loan work in terms of our presentations and pointing out some of the plan changes. If you haven't looked at those presentations, I would encourage you to go back and check them out. But with 529, there are some really interesting things that can happen. Here, there are so many ways to use this plan, whether it's in-state, out-of-state. You can put money into the plan. If you have a young family, you can start setting aside even a modest savings goal that goes in, tax deferred, no taxes when you apply it. Vocational schools, apprenticeships. I mean, student loan repayment. You could, if you're planning right now and your child at some point is maybe, in high school and you're trying to make some plans and you don't want them to graduate with significant debt, and maybe not everyone's going to be a full scholarship winner. You want to see that your kid can go to college and have an education. There are some ways to benefit the student loan repayment option, even for your children, through this 529. So as a savings goal, it has some real advantages to it. And then, I would just encourage you, if you're interested in these types of plans, we want to put you in contact with folks that can specialize in 529 as a savings goal. And this could be, again, one of those items that's tied to an automated budget that goes into this account. And if you do this, if you have a high school child and you just build a modest savings into this plan, that's money that our children are not graduating with when they leave college. And tuition, room and board, public, private, it covers pretty much everything. So even if we have to borrow through the federal loan program, and with those federal loan programs, particularly in grad school, being reduced, and some of the other plans through the federal loan program being reduced across programs, this is a great way to say, okay, if I'm planning out and my child is interested in these types of programs, in addition to student loans that I may need to take, then this is a way to offset some of those expenses long term. So a great checklist item for 2026. And then quickly, we'll run through just a couple other things. Our overall investments. We talk about our 401ks. We talk about investments just generally in terms of how do we prioritize, what retirement should look like or what we're currently investing in. If you haven't talked to anyone and you see that, certainly the market will change. So I don't want you to think that, if you've seen some money lost in your investment through inflation and some other things, we don't want to rush you out to start having all these different asset allocation formulas take place. Okay, you have to be the judge of that in terms of how the market functions. But if oftentimes folks will be given plans and you choose them and then you kind of put money into them, and there's a lot of kind of misunderstanding about maybe what's happening within that plan. If you fall into that category, and I know a lot of folks do, who want to set you up with an advisor who can target your goal to a better asset allocation, diversify in ways that's going to make sense for you. as opposed to you were given a booklet and you chose some stuff that kind of looked, appealing, and then you're not really making much on your 401k. Talk with some folks. Don't let another year pass where you haven't gone in and spoke, talked to someone, talked about your plan, put something else into practice that maybe is a little better for you. An investment advisor or just getting some good advice on these plans can make a tremendous difference in whether or not they work or not for you. We're not all sitting around, savvy enough to make these plans function. So if you haven't done it in a few years, if you're doing well and you want to stay the course, that is fantastic. But if you've gotten yourself into a situation where you need some guidance and things are just not working right now, or you're confused about this process, don't let another year go as we're in that season for benefits and in our future investments to pass us by. Talk with some folks. Let us know if we can help you. And then again, planning for the unexpected. This is something that we always want to think about, part of that employee benefit process. If your insurance needs need to be adjusted, we certainly want to do that. If there's opportunities, if you don't have a term plan and you've got a young family, or you just don't carry a lot of insurance at this point, maybe you've got an employer plan that offers some benefit, but then you don't have adequate term policy in place to cover in case something happens to you. Maybe this needs to be on your list for the coming year. I know a lot of young folks who really don't have any insurance in place in case something were to happen. And if you have a young family, you just bought a home and you're setting yourself up and you don't have a term plan, we never know. That's the point about insurance. We're trying to make predictions about what the future holds. What's that future risk? I'm going to encourage you to look at your insurance needs. Make certain that if anything were to happen to you, what do we leave for others so that they can continue on? So term plan is very easy to set up and has tremendous benefits. And then something I think is always smart, getting your records and your storing of all your important documents in places where you can find them. This is always important. And I am not the best at it at times, so I'll plead guilty now. But oftentimes, someone will need documents from you, or just it could be school, it could be anything. Where's those documents at? Where did I put them? Have a safe place, have a consistent place for all these records that you need, insurance policies, any number of different financial documents. Just make certain that you have them organized and ready to go when you need them. Taxes, we'll be filing taxes here soon. You want to make sure you have all your records prepared and ready to go for that you can find them, things are ready to go. I need some work on that myself, but just encourage you as we're at year end, this is also an important part of being prepared for the coming year. And then we'll kind of close here, and I'll take a couple questions in our remaining time. I can't stress enough the number of times that I see underinvestment in our employer-sponsored retirement plans. So if you're not there, again, like I said, part of our goal, if you're at 2%, let's go to 3, let's go to 4. How far can you go? Use this current time to make a consistent plan, get that checklist in order so that we can eliminate some of our debts and get as close to that employer match, the full match, as we can. For folks that are on the call as well, if you're kind of at that period where you can start an IRA, you're getting a little older, you've taken care of your expenses, you got your kids in college, trying to do some other things, we might want to think about a Roth, something else that can generate. So we start to have buckets of funds, various, whether it's Social Security or IRA, we start to put these things together towards a larger retirement goal. This is that life cycle that we have to think about, getting up in age and figuring out where we go with this. Most importantly, if you are underinvesting, I can't stress it enough. If you're underinvesting in one of the plans, make that an important checklist item in the coming year. And then lastly, beneficiary designations, those sorts of things. This all comes into You know, we have to kind of look at this to make certain everything is prepared. Again, I think most of us, we probably don't do this once we set it up. We probably never look at it again. You know, we think we've got it there. And then there's certain times where you just overlook some of those key details. I fell into this category myself on a beneficiary form. Couldn't even believe that I did it, but it was there. Go back and check, make sure all your beneficiaries and all your other accounts are in good order. Again, it's just part of that planning process to make sure that you've covered the widest part of your plans. You've covered all things, make sure that all your beneficiary designations and everything are up to where you want them to be. And I've given you lots of different examples, but there's a lot of discussion about having a will. That's often probably one of the most overlooked of all financial plans. Even with folks who are carrying insurance and others, having some type of basic will often is not in place. So if any of these jump off the page and you say, well, I don't have any of those in order, it's another good item for 2026. Well, that brings us to the end. And I just want to say thank you for everyone joining the call. The holidays are approaching us. We're just a couple weeks out now from holiday season. Take time to organize your finances, start with your budget, set your priorities, align your goals, and let's make certain that we have a strong start to 2026. And with that, I will close, answer any questions, and happy holidays to everyone.
All right, thank you, Todd, and thanks everyone for joining today's webinar. I know we have a couple minutes left, so I'd like to get to a few questions in our time remaining. Todd, our first question says, if someone's emergency fund isn't fully funded yet, what's the most practical way to prioritize building it without sacrificing other year-end financial goals?
Oh, yeah, tough question, actually. I mean, again, there's always going to be so many things that are pulling you in different directions. That's that notion of a trade-off. You know, it's, you know, as far as fully funded, are we talking 3 months, 6 months? I don't know exactly where we're aiming at there, but, you know, I am a pretty strong believer in automating the process. You could do that two ways. You could do that through payroll deduction. So you'd incrementally pick a number there. You incrementally build a fund through a payroll deduction that goes into a separate savings, your emergency savings. And then you could also do some type of transfer if you can afford to make these transfers, automatic transfers into that fund. So now you're hitting it from two different sides. If you are tracking your expenses as well, just monitoring things, it might allow you to kind of figure out if you can adjust that number at some point in the year. And really, in order to fully fund that priority, again, we went through a whole checklist of items here that will pull funds from you. If you're going to fully fund that emergency savings, I would automate the process, figure out what that exact number needs to be that you're aiming at, how much that's going to cost you, you know, weekly or monthly, automate the process. And the least debt that you can carry is probably the surest way to meet that fully funded emergency savings. But it's really going to start with what you can afford.
Right. And we will get through this one last question. Todd, what is the most effective way to set realistic goals for 2026 without feeling overwhelmed?
Yeah, great question. There's no way to get beyond feeling that sometimes you wish you could just do all these different things. You know, we all want to accomplish so much. What I'm going to encourage you to do is just sit down and rank order your priorities. You know, what is exactly your goal? You know, and you just rank order these items. Take a piece of paper out. I mean, just make it simple. You know, write down a couple of these things. What is it that you want to accomplish? You want to get a car, you want to pay off some debts, probably some combination of all those sorts of things. So what we're going to do is we're just going to rank order some items. You want to narrow that list down to a couple key priorities. And then we start to use our budget, you know, track our expenses, start to really kind of get into those details to figure out how do we reach those three highest needs. But it really starts with you trying to figure out, among all the different things that I have in front of me, all the challenges, what are the three things that I can do now that will have the most impact in the coming year? Is it paying off debt? Is it creating my savings, raising my credit, putting more money? What do I need to do? That question is going to be unique to each of us on the call. But it starts simple. It starts with you writing something down, rank order those items, and then if you need some help, that's why we're on the call today. I can play a part in that. The credit union can play a part in that. The key here is that you're not going it alone. We'll help you through that process. So give me a call. I'd be more than happy to help you. And then if I can't solve some of those issues for you, that's why we have a whole team of folks that we work with as partners through the credit union to help you become successful. So start there, give us a call. We'll be more than happy to help you.
Thank you all so much for joining us. That is going to conclude our Q&A session and our webinar for today. If you have any additional questions, feel free to reach out to events@gecreditunion.org, or Todd's information is up on the screen if you would like to reach out to Todd directly. But with that, that is going to conclude today's webinar. Thank you all so much for joining us and have a great rest of your day.